Well, I'm in the Polytunnel today because it's really windy out there and I don't have too many jobs to be doing on the actual groundwork itself. So I'm in here and I'm going to have a big tidy up because I've got a lot of furniture, boxes and stuff that just needs organising or moving somewhere else so that I can set up. I've got more of these racking stands, to set up in here so that I'm all ready for when the time comes to start sowing everything. So I've got a cup of tea, my fuel for the morning, and yeah, let's crack on. Cheers. Well, there we go. I'm all set and ready to sow now. I've got the 3 racking shelves set up. Behind me I've got a little table and my stool for writing notes and if I want to take a little tea break in here. And then we've got my potting table with my little potting box. And the sides of this come down, which is brilliant. And this is my recycled pallet table that I kind of knocked up a few years ago. And then underneath I've got my tubs of vermiculite and perlite to mix into my compost. So I'm all set and ready to go, and it just feels good to be on top of things. I've also got some manure spread down ready for the tomatoes, but we won't be planting them out for a long time yet. It looks so empty compared to how this place looks around sort of like the end of July when it's just like a jungle. Today it's really windy outside and it's spitting with rain quite a bit too, so I thought I would take shelter in the Polytunnel and actually get some seed sown. So I thought I'd go over a few little tips and tricks and show you my methods for sowing seeds and some of the new methods that I'm actually going to be trying this year as well. In my potting box I've actually just got some multi-purpose compost in here and I'm about to mix some perlite in it. Now perlite is actually a volcanic glass, but they look like tiny little white pebbles or bits of stone, but they're really light, and I've mixed this into my compost because it really helps improve the drainage. It helps retain the moisture, which will then feed the plant, and it also helps prevent the compost from getting too compact. So after you water it quite a few times it tends to compact a little bit, and this just helps aerate it and keep it quite an open structure, and that also helps for the roots to grow quite freely as well. I don't really have a precise mix for this, I just throw in a few handfuls until it looks about right. Oh, that should do it, I think. Now I'm actually going to sow some beetroot, some leek, and what else have I got here? Oh yeah, some Welsh onion as well. So I'm going to start with the beetroot and I'm going to show you a new method that I've learnt from Charles Dowding. So I recently went to a talk by Charles Dowding, and for those that aren't familiar with him, he is a gardener who practices the no-dig gardening method, and he's become a bit of a guru for it, and he's always experimenting with different ways of gardening to help reduce your weeds, to save you time, and just generally make life easier. It was a really informative talk and I took a lot away from it as well. And one of the things that I was really interested to try was multi-sowing. So normally when you're sowing something like beetroot, you will plant 1 per cell, or like a module if you're doing a module tray like this, then prick it out and give it enough space between all of the other plants. But Charles says that actually you can multi-sow 4 or 5 seeds per module and they'll grow as a little clump. And what you can then do is take out the smaller beetroots as you want them and then let the others grow and develop into really big plants. So it struck me as a way that you can actually save space and time as well. So I'm not going to be thinking about multi-sowing successionally, so where you sow some seeds, then wait a few weeks and then sow some more. So I'm going to try that. Now I'm growing a few different varieties of beetroot this year, but this one is bolt hardy, which means it's less likely to go to seed and bolt, which apparently is really good for this type of sowing. Now, one of the little tips I have for you is, it might sound obvious, but to open your seed packet at the right end. So occasionally I just get too excited and rip the top off, but then you kind of lose the detail on what your seed is. Turn it over and open the flap at the bottom, or you might have the other version from the top. So beetroot seeds are nice and big, so they're really easy to sow. And they look like little, I don't know, asteroids, or quite funny little seeds these are. Now I've got a choice. I can either sow a row down here or this way. Now I think I'm going to go this direction and have maybe 2 rows. Now Charles says to sow about 4 or 5 seeds per module, which sounds like a lot, but if you end up having all of them germinate, you can always pull a few out, because beetroot do actually divide into multiple plants. So I'm not going to be too thorough here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It does mean you end up using a lot more seed, but with things like beetroot, you tend to get quite a lot in the packet anyway.
I end up sharing them out, to be honest, because sometimes I'm now looking at seed, I'm looking at 400 or 500 beetroots. And of course they'll keep from year to year as well. There we go. Sounds a bit quick, but...
That's it done. Now we cover them over. And they'll probably take about a week to 10 days to germinate, I imagine. Always remember your label. I'm just using a plastic label here. I tend to recycle them each year using some nail varnish remover to clean them off. I like to write them this way around, and I'll explain that in a second. And also you want to write the date on the back. I think today is the 15th. So I write it from the top downwards, and the reason for that is so that you can easily read it, whereas if you wrote it the other way round, you have to kind of tilt your head, and if you've got a system where you know which way round it is, you can have them all lined up and you don't have to keep turning your neck. It's so windy out there. I really hope you can hear me okay. So that's the beetroot done, and also in this tray I can sow lots more, and these module trays are great, but it's always worth investing in one that is actually strong enough to last you for a few years, because they are made of plastic, and obviously we want to reduce the amount of plastic that we're using. In the past I fell for the £1 seed trays, and look, this is what happens to them. They just completely break apart, and all these little pieces will end up in your soil. And I've said it before, but I want to say it again, just try not to buy these really cheap flimsy trays, because that's just going to end up in our soil, in the sea, and it's just no good. And the same goes for these trays that you would then put your modules into and water them from. You know, it's completely split. The ones that I use now are much stronger, really sturdy, and also they're not likely to break when I'm transporting my plants as well. But you can also reuse plastic, and these are my sweet peas grown in grape punnets, and as you can see they're doing really well, and they're really benefiting from the really deep pot because they like to grow really long roots. And my boyfriend eats a lot of grapes, so I'll be recycling all of the pots from now on to grow lots of seeds in. And this is a mushroom tray that you can get from your local greengrocers if they're happy to give you some for free. And yeah, it's just great for transporting, and when I water my seedlings, the rainwater will drain through the bottom. that's a little bit about your seed trays, and it doesn't matter whether you prefer the modules or the open trays, just make sure you're buying good quality, and it's really worth paying a few extra quid for something that's going to last you a lot longer and not end up broken into a million pieces of plastic pollution. When I was at the Charles Dowding talk, I actually picked up this book. I met Charles and we had a really good chat, and he was a really lovely guy. And this is just my recommended book at the moment. If you're looking to go no dig, or if you're just looking for some extra garden tips, this book is brilliant. It goes into lots of different subjects like clearing weeds, potions that you can make at home using things from your garden that you can use to clean your house and clean your body, seed saving, storing your vegetables, growing salad all year. It's a really good book, and it's called No Dig, Organic Home and Garden, Grow, Cook, Use and Store Your Harvest by Charles Dowding and Stephanie Hafferty. And both of them are on Instagram, and Charles has his own YouTube channel as well, which if you don't already follow, I really suggest you go and have a look. So I'm just going to sow some more beetroot, and this is called Moulin Rouge, and I'm just going to do a few more rows because I really want quite a lot of beetroot this year. I'm actually going to go 1 row multi-sow and 1 row normal with these, just to see what works out best. I haven't actually grown leeks before, and I think because I've not really had that much space for them, and they're not one of my most favourite vegetables, I kind of just wrote it off as something I wasn't going to grow. And these are actually a trial variety of seed called Stocky F1, and I got them free with my order, so they're obviously just looking for people to try them. Don't get too many in a packet, perhaps that's because it's a freebie. So I might have enough for 1 row, and I'm going to put about 3 seeds in each. Now these seeds are much smaller, so they don't really need to go too deep. I just realised I've actually put the seeds on top of the previous row, which is not a good idea. So I'm just going to fish them out and move them over. There we go, well they're in. I might get a few random leeks with my beetroot, but we'll see. Beetroot leek, so that's another thing done. Now I've actually already sown some of my lettuce, and I do this in the same method as Charles Dowding this time. So in this tray I actually levelled off my compost, I then sprinkled on the seeds and then topped it with vermiculite, which is this really fine, gritty, kind of sandy, stony kind of material. And what that does is it helps prevent the seedlings from dampening off, because apparently basil and lettuce don't really like to be too wet. And if you sort of compact them under lots of compost, then they might just rot away and not even germinate. And they've all germinated, as well as my basil, which is at home. I've got 3 varieties of lettuce here. One that's known as Drunken Woman, Fat Lazy Blonde. I grew that last year, it was brilliant. It was a nice big buttery leafy head, and it's called Fat Lazy Blonde because it's big, it's yellowish, and the laziness means it's quite slow to go to seed, so it's a really good one. And also I've got some all the year round there at the front. Now next up I'm actually going to sow some shallots in one of these trays, and I haven't grown shallots or onions from seed before actually, so this is going to be an interesting trial this year to see how it goes. I do actually have some shallots in modules on the go, so I'll be able to compare what works better, whether it's the seed or the set. So there we are, filled up my tray. Just pat it down a little bit so it's nice and firm. Oh, there's even a worm in there. Now these are called Zebrune shallots. Again, they're from DT Brown, and it says they're a very productive variety, pinkish elongated bulbs with good resistance to bolting, excellent flavour. So let's just sprinkle these onto the tray, and because shallots actually divide into a clump themselves, I'm not going to be doing the multi-sowing method that I've done before. Now I'm actually going to grow 2 varieties in this one tray. I'm going to divide my tray in half and have shallot on one side, and I've also got some pickling onion. which I'm going to do on the other side. So I'm just going to get a label so I can separate it out. So I know that anything I sow on this side are the brune shallot, and I'm just kind of sprinkling them diagonally, zigzagging across the tray, and then go the other way to try and fill the gaps. Now I think these are going to be quite dense, so I will need to thin them out. I think that'll do. I'm going to save some of the seed. Just in case it all goes wrong, I can sow some more. I'm actually working backwards here. I tend to write out my labels before I sow the seed, just in case you get your packets muddled up and then you kind of forget which variety you've sown. So I'd normally have them all written out first. And it's called Onion de Paris, and it's a pickling onion. It says a delicious crop of small, rather flat, white-skinned, full-flavoured bulbs, which are perfect for pickling or adding to casseroles or salads. I've not grown any onion from seed before, and in fact I've always sworn that I'll never grow onions again, because I usually grow them from sets, and they've never really done that well for me. I think because I never really fed them, and I don't know, they're just not really growing well for me, but I just thought I'd give these a try this time, see how it goes. Compost is kind of damp, it's not too wet. But what I'm going to do now is the same technique as the lettuce and the basil. I'm actually going to top it with some vermiculite. Ideally, if I wasn't on my table, I'd just do this directly over the tub. Oh, sugar. Whoopsie. Alright, it's fine, it's fine. It's all good. Let's just pop that back. Seeds might be a little bit deeper if they're still there. Firm it down. In fact, what I could do, there you go, that just goes to show why it's always good to save some of the seed. Alright, well, I've got bits of compost where it shouldn't be, but you get the picture. Okay, now I'm also going to be sowing some Welsh onion, and I already grow some of this next to my carrot bed, and it's used just like a spring onion really, or you can divide it into clumps and use it like a little onion. So I'm actually going to sow this into the tray as well, and I think I'm going to sow 3 or 4 per cell. These are some of the beetroot that I sowed about a week ago, and I actually kept them at home in my heated propagator. So they germinated really quickly, within about 5 or 6 days I believe, and they do need a little bit of a watering. You can see I've only just brought them to the polytunnel from home, which is why they're leaning, because they would have been leaning towards the window for their light. And it looks like I've got a random, is that a sweet pea or a pea in there that's just sort of popped in as well. So yeah, these ones are doing really well, and I'll have hopefully lots more soon that'll catch up with them. Meanwhile, at home, all of my tender vegetables are growing really well now. I've got lots of chilies, lots of tomatoes, and lots of exciting new varieties to try. Well, that's about all I'll be sowing for today. The wind is really starting to pick up now, so I'm sorry if you couldn't hear me too well in places. I still need to replace my microphone that broke quite a while ago. Kind of just strung it on now with a hairpin. Anyway, I'm going to put my seed trays on my shelving here, give it a quick water, and then head home. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys very soon.